9:14 through 29. And in your Pew Bible, it is on page 1056. And in your Pew Bible, the title is The Healing of a Boy with an Evil Spirit. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them, and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing with them about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. Ask your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they cannot." "O unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can't," said Jesus, "everything is possible for him who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the evil spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciple asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, This kind can come out only by prayer." The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
I'm always glad when Jay's the liturgist, we have stories like this, because he just brings them to life. Really do. Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Let me give you just a little bit of background on this, because the lectionary, the Revised Common Lectionary that we follow, and then a lot of other preaching entities follow through different times of the Christian year, especially during Lent and Advent and Christmas and seasons like Pentecost and whatnot. Did a little something different this year that I don't remember them having done, at least for the last couple of years. And that is, they split the story of the Transfiguration. A couple of weeks ago, we had the first part of this pericope, or this passage, where Jesus and three of his disciples went up on the mountain, and there Jesus was transfigured, and Jesus and the disciples were able to be in the presence of Moses and Elijah. God's voice came down and reminded the disciples, "This is my son, listen to him." And also the point was made that as much as we would like to live life on the mountaintop, where the air is rare and holy, it's kind of like going on a pilgrimage or on a walk to Emmaus or any spiritual retreat after 2 or 3 days, you just want to stay there. You don't want to come back and face what you know has not changed since you left. But the lesson is very real. Jesus says, no, the work's down in the valley. The work is not up here. The work's down there, and so we've got to go back. And so this passage, this Sunday, is that trip back down the mountain and what happens on the way. And so, as we begin to look at it, we can see that in essence it was an act of hopeful desperation. It really was a matter of last resort. The father brought the boy to see if Jesus could heal him, but there was only one problem. Jesus wasn't anywhere around. Jesus was gone. So I imagine the conversation went something like this. Where did you say he went? Oh, up on the mountain somewhere. No one knows what he's doing up there. I mean, he's Jesus, and he doesn't always tell us ahead of time what he's going to do, but he just got up one morning and grabbed Peter and James and John, and off they went. And when will they be back? I told you, it's Jesus. No one knows for sure. So the father is standing there, his son dangling in his arms, staring at Jesus' 9 remaining disciples. And from Luke's gospel, and this story is in all three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In Luke's gospel, we find out that this boy was the father's only son, his only child. So he couldn't bear the thought of going back home with nothing to show for it. I mean, how could he face his wife having done nothing for their child? The demon that dominated his son's body had rendered him both deaf and dumb. The boy couldn't speak. He couldn't cry out when he was in pain. He couldn't pray, nor could he hear his father's prayers, repeated endlessly through sleepless nights, a seizure and convulsing. The boy never knew the sound of his mother's voice singing lullabies tenderly and softly in his ear. And when the fit seized him, burning his face impossibly red, his cries of terror and pain were horrible, but silent. Someday, I believe it was the intention of the demon all along that someday it would be the death of this boy. So is there really nothing that could be done? Well, by this time, a crowd of the usual suspects had begun to gather. You had religious gawkers, you had Jesus' groupies, you had the ever hostile scribes and religious leaders. And everyone waited to see what Jesus' disciples would do. We can imagine the disciples eyeing the boy nervously and exchanging knowing nods with one another. Yes, they must have fretted. Something needs to be done. And yes, Jesus had given them authority over evil spirits. You remember back earlier on in Mark and in Luke, Jesus had sent them out 2 by 2 and given them the authority to raise people from the dead, to rid people of demons, to heal the sick. So they had already enjoyed a little bit of success as itinerant exorcists, driving out demons in Jesus' name. And so they agreed to take on the boy's case. But it wasn't easy. In fact, it seemed almost impossible. No matter how hard they tried, no matter what they said, no matter how many times they waved their hands in the air, nothing happened except the boy began to spasm and seize and grow rigid and foam at the mouth, just as the father describes. Now the scribes must have smiled wryly and nodded in self-righteous satisfaction that Jesus' disciples turned out not to be as cool as everybody thought they were. So the disciples hemmed and hawed. The father's heart sank, and he despaired. He collected his son, got ready to go, when suddenly Jesus showed up. And just to get ahead of the story a little bit, isn't that the way it happens? Just suddenly Jesus kind of shows up. So the crowd parted and gave way, and Jesus, noticing what was going on within the crowd and between the disciples and the crowd and the scribes, it says, "What are you arguing about?" And the poor father piped up before anybody else could answer. He didn't even bother watching his tone. "Teacher, I brought my son here to you." The implication being, but you weren't here. So I asked your disciples to cast out the demon, and they could not. Now, it's hard to say, and I'm not really sure. But I think there was probably more sorrow in Jesus' voice than anger when he turned to the boy's father and to the disciples and to the crowd and to the scribes and said, "Oh, you faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to put up with you?" Reminds us of the times that Jesus looked at others in Scripture and said, "O ye of little faith." No wonder that some translations of the Bible describe this attribute of God as being long-suffering. And how long is the refrain of the lamenting psalms, of the complaint psalms? Normally in the Bible, it seems like people complain when they are fed up with God not intervening, with God not changing the circumstances, but we forget the incredible amount of patience that God daily demonstrates toward us. How long? So Jesus said, "Bring the boy to me." So they brought him to Jesus, and almost on cue, he began convulsing again. His body thrown to the ground, in the fire, in the water, banging his head against the ground, convulsing, foaming at the mouth. Chilling consistency. The demon was doing the demon's work inside this boy, and his entire life had been like that. And the father pleaded with Jesus, "If you can do anything, have compassion and help us." If you can, Jesus will. Notice that the father didn't say, "If you will." We sometimes pass over that because I think a lot of times our question is, it's not that you can't, but will you? But in this case, the father, his belief side must have taken into consideration that Jesus would, but the question was, if you can. If you can, Jesus said, all things are possible for those who believe. And Jesus' words must have smarted on the Father's ears, because in a way it was a rebuke, and yes, it hurts. And we may think, how dare Jesus to upbraid a person in a situation like that with everything he felt and all he had been going through? How dare Jesus be impersonal and almost cold and unfeeling like that? But Jesus' words weren't just seemingly impersonal, they were very personal, because Jesus' words were also a ray of hope and a way out, because he said, all things are possible for one who believes. All things are possible. Jesus was in the business of making all things possible. Jesus was in the business of doing miracles, of making impossible things happen. And even now, at the proverbial end of the rope, even now, maybe, just maybe, something could be done for my son. Maybe even now. And that's when the father cried out, "I believe, but help me in my unbelief." Some ancient manuscripts even add that he burst into tears. That was basically the father's prayer. That was the father's confession. I want to believe. In fact, I really do believe. I know you can do miracles. I've heard about what you've done. That's why I'm here. I know you can change lives. But I just can't see it right now. Sometimes the devil seems too strong, and I'm just too weak, and I don't know what to think anymore. I don't know what to believe anymore. But if you can, help my unbelief. And Jesus did. He gave faith to the doubting father. He took away the disbelief of the disciples. He commanded the demon to come out, and out it came. But it didn't come out quietly, and it didn't come out willingly. After it rattled the boy to within an inch of his last breath, everyone thought that the boy was dead. And in this very emotional moment, the boy, in his survival, Jesus reached down and picked him up by the hand, and he stood up. And he delivered the boy back to the father. The word used is he gave the boy back to his father, fully healed. The boy had new life. The father had renewed faith. And so with the Father's cry, the Father's prayer, we too cry out, don't we? Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. Lord, I believe. We've got the belief part covered. Because I believe. I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe. I wouldn't be praying to you if I didn't believe. I would have been baptized. I wouldn't have joined the church. I would have been doing all the other things I do if I didn't believe. Oh God, sometimes I don't believe. Sometimes I have doubts. Sometimes I wonder. Sometimes I worry. You told me not to worry. Don't worry. I worry, are you going to show up? I worry, what are you really trying to do here? What are you trying to show here? What are you trying to prove? Why do my loved ones hurt so much? Why can't you take care of them? I do believe. I do. But sometimes I live in a world of doubt. You ever struggle? Do you? Not just to believe, but to trust, to have faith. You know, Jesus didn't say we had to have much faith. He said, as a matter of fact, you don't have to have any more faith than just faith the size of a grain of a mustard seed. But do you ever go through those times when you just don't feel the faith? You know, someone who still is, in a lot of ways, a Christian caregiver. I was a hospital chaplain and then a hospice chaplain as well as a full-time clergy. So I saw a lot of tragedy, a lot of heartache, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of things not going right in life. And there were times when I thought, you know what, I really belong more with the doubters than I belong with those who are really self-sure and certain in their faith, because I have questions. Paul has questions. All of us, at one time or another, as parents or grandparents or children, we have questions. And we think sometimes, I'm not supposed to question. That's not what it's all about. It's wrong for me to question. I believe, just help me in my unbelief. Maybe like the father, life is beating it out of you. And maybe like the child, you've gone through the fire and felt like you were drowning in the water. I get it. I get it. So we wonder, is God really good? Can God really be trusted? I mean, will he come through in the end for me? He came in the end for some folks I know, but will he come through in the end for me? Will he even show up? Does he love me unconditionally? Seems like the helpless prayer that the Father is praying, doesn't it? Kind of a hopeless place to be. So we echo that cry of the Father. I believe. Oh God, I believe. But not always. And not always like I should. So help me when I'm weak. Help me in my unbelief. Help me when I cannot stand what I do not know. Help me when I don't understand. Help me when I try to put my own explanation to things. Help me when I try to take care of the things that only you can take care of, because only I should be depending on only you. So help me. good God. A good God. You know, this father despaired over his only son, and you know where I'm going with this. A good God loved us enough to let his only begotten son die for us. And that's what's coming up. That's what we're doing in Lent and in Easter. And a good God like that will answer our prayer, our confession, and will increase our faith. We may not see it for hours, days, weeks, months, or even years. But God is good. God is gracious. God is loving. God is merciful. God will help us in our unbelief. Because he's not only got the belief side covered, he's got the unbelief side covered too. So maybe that should be our prayer through the rest of Lent. God, I thank you that I believe. I thank you for the gift of faith. But also, help me in my unbelief. Please. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.